Welcome. This is Pain to Power, and I am your host, Maria Cosme, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting. And this is the show where we turn our struggles into strengths and we heal in community. If you haven't done it yet, please make sure you subscribe, like, and as you are jumping into our conversation today, that you are in the chat asking us questions and engaging. We love that you're here. As many of you might know, I am a writer in addition to having this show. And this week, I revisited a piece I wrote in October of 2020. And it was at the beginning of a time in my life where everything was shifting. And just 2 years out of a damaging 17-year marriage, I was trying to find the parts of myself I had lost in this wake. And in the process, I wrote this piece called Metamorphosis. And I want to read a little excerpt of this idea of what happens to a caterpillar as it becomes a butterfly, and this idea of metamorphosis. So here's my piece. It's a little bit for you to get a taste of it and hear a little bit of what we're talking about when we're saying metamorphosis. In the chrysalis, the old body dies and dissolves in order to form a new one with wings. Eventually, a butterfly emerges that holds the soul of the caterpillar but bears no resemblance to the insect that created the temporary home. The caterpillar before and the butterfly afterward are familiar to most of us, but the extreme changes that occur in the chrysalis are unseen. The caterpillar does not change into something new. Through work and time, it becomes what it was always meant to be. And at that time, I didn't fully understand what I was becoming. But now, as I am closing out season 5 of Pain to Power, a show that didn't even exist then, and stepping into a new chapter of my work, I can see it. This season has really been about identity and return, about leaving one life and finding the courage to face yourself in the middle of becoming. And tonight is no different. Tonight, I get to sit with the filmmaker, J.R. Stokes, a creator who brings us into that in-between space through his film, Beautiful Pam, a story that holds the complexity, contradiction, and humanity of becoming. So excited to have you here, J.R.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
This is awesome, right?
Great.
Well, I have to say, you and I think we talked in early fall, maybe, right?
Yeah.
After meeting, and the first time I met you, it was such a cool experience because I was with Mr. M, who is our producer here on the iRant Network, at the Queens World Film Festival, and you had this feature film, your first feature film, Beautiful Pam. It left such a powerful impression on me, and I know so many other people in the audience. From the moment the film started, you couldn't look away. You couldn't not feel, you couldn't not experience all of the humanity that you created. So I am so excited to have you here to share your story of just you, but also the film and everything that everyone can look forward to watching in this film.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it. That's incredibly kind of you to say. I'm just excited to be here. It's been a long time in the making.
Absolutely, right? So, and I know that you've watched some of my shows, but I always open up with the question about this idea of turning pain into power, because I think everybody has a really different personal connection to that idea. So when you think about it, what has that meant for you?
Turning pain into power, as you talked about earlier with metamorphosis, right? We're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing, and we're constantly navigating life. And that's not an easy process. And I'm sure we're going to get deeper into that throughout this episode. And that's sort of what Beautiful Pam touches on as well. It's about navigating every day, and every day happens to be an obstacle, and that's not always the easiest thing to manage. But hey, we're still here, right? We're still figuring that part out.
Absolutely. And we keep moving forward. But I love that, right? It's that constant, again, evolution. And metamorphosis is not once only sometimes, right? It's many times, right? That we go through these changes. I love that. And I know that we're going to talk about the film, but I really want to know a little bit about just you and your starting points of before Beautiful Pam. Who was JR as a creative, as a young kid? What are some of the things that identified you as you were growing up and becoming?
Sure. Well, I think I'm still figuring that part out, honestly.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I mean, Beautiful Pam, this is my second feature film. My first feature film I had worked on a few years ago, right out of high school, and that followed adolescent substance abuse. And that was like sort of my film school in a way. And then going back before that, even, I've been making films of all kinds since I'm younger than 8 or 9 years old. This is just, it's been a gradual process of wanting to tell stories, and especially wanting to tell stories that people can take time out of their day to come sit down and watch and enjoy and forget about life for a few hours, and rather maybe even reflect on their own life, after the fact. That's always something that's been inherent, and it's almost difficult to explain in words for that. It's just something that I've always felt very strongly about throughout my life, and especially in terms of different forms of filmmaking. I used to make machinimas, which is sort of this like niche form of animated filmmaking, and that's something I gradually moved on from as I got a little older and stuff. And my childhood best friend Brandon and we've been making all sorts of films since we were fourth graders, and I would be the cameraman and I would tell him what to do. And, it didn't always come out good, but hey, listen, that it's a process, it's starting somewhere, getting from point A to point B, and that's everything in life, and especially in terms of talking about trying to become a filmmaker, right? And making a feature film like Beautiful Pam, it's been a process of many years of being a young person and trying to tell these stories.
That's amazing though that you have been doing this for that long, right? And telling the stories, right? Not just into it because it's fun, but like it's really about storytelling for you. Like it sounds like even in fourth grade, right? What
Yeah.
was fourth grade films that were storytelling for you? Like what's the riveting thing that a fourth grader wants to capture and in their everyday life to tell the story of? I'm so curious.
Lots of bank robbers, lots of cops and robbers.
Okay.
We have a few different videos of, I'm the guy behind the camera and I'm telling him, "Give me all your money," or such and such. That was always something that interested us. I grew up watching a lot of Scorsese films, like even from a very young age, and I probably shouldn't have been watching them. So I was always very fascinated by the crime genre and by crime drama films in general. And that's something that me and Brandon did a lot, and tried to recreate in our own little ways.
That's I mean, that makes sense, right? For a little boy. And, right up the right,
Exactly.
that totally hits, right?
Yeah,
And but, to your point again, like, it's the start of storytelling, and storytelling has evolved as you've continued to make films and gone deeper, and, I mean, you talk about your first feature film, which was about substance abuse, which is a pretty heavy, heavy place to start, right? Like, that is pretty deep, right?
yeah,
So, what has pushed you to start creating these films that have
sure,
to do with so much complexity of
sure,
human understanding and like and
sure.
just exploration?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question because for me personally, I've always been interested in trying to understand people, trying to understand myself. I think I'm a complex person. I think many people are complex. I don't think anyone is simple, right? I think we're all complicated in our own ways, and there's something inside me that's really interested to try and figure that part out. And I'm always interested to try and learn about different cultures and different types of people and different lifestyles. That's something that's very I think of myself as a very curious person, and hey, sometimes that gets me in trouble, but for the most part, it leads me to new experiences and new places, and especially in trying to be a storyteller, trying to make films. It's led me to places like this, where I'm able to talk about this and to have great conversations about this.
And then you're expanding other people's perspectives on
Yeah,
which I mean, really, like that's the purpose, right? Film
I would
is
hope so.
to open new doors and windows for others to see through, right?
Yeah,
And mirrors, all of it.
completely agree with that.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so, I mean, okay, so I'm gonna take you a little bit out of your film space and bring you into
Sure.
the pain to power space, which is like JR, right? So
That's
yes,
okay.
you're a filmmaker, but you're also like you're JR, right?
Sure.
Like you are a man who is telling stories, but also living in your own story. So when you think about that and a lot of these film choices, did you ever see parts of yourself within characters of in terms of like belonging or just dynamics and relationships and navigating things.
120%. I mean, listen, I'll start with this. If every film was about my life, it'd be a very boring movie because my life is not that interesting. However, as you were pointing out, there are aspects of the characters that we see in these films and some of the things they express about themselves and about the world around them that I'm speaking from me. That's me writing through the character from my own perspective on life and the world, however, it's coming from a place and it's coming from people on screen who I don't lead the same lifestyle as, because again, there's always that curious aspect of, hey, how can I understand this person? How can I understand this lifestyle? And how can I get other people to see this person's lifestyle as well? So it's a mix, in my opinion. I write from a very personal place, and sometimes that could be a very dangerous thing, but however, for the most part, in trying to write from a personal place, it allows me to understand the characters even more, and therefore, I hope it comes across through the screen. I always hope that when people, especially people that I know, watch the films, number one, I hope they enjoy it. I don't ever want someone to be fucking bored out of their mind by watching the film. However, also I want people to walk away from it maybe thinking, wow, maybe I understand a little bit more about JR as a person. Maybe I understand a little bit more about the lifestyle that we see on screen.
Yeah. Oh, that's important though. And I think you're lifting up this vulnerability aspect of filmmaking when you're bringing in pieces of yourself but layering it into another story, right? And with Beautiful Pam particularly, and there's a overarching idea of belonging. And even this show, the title I gave it, right, is who belongs, like who has that belonging for us. So again, going back to you and thinking about your journey, where and how have you navigated this idea
Mhm.
of belonging?
Well, I think I'm still figuring that part out. I mean, I've said that a few times tonight, but there are multiple times in trying to figure out this crazy, chaotic life where I say to myself, "What am I doing?" I mean, I don't have things figured out, and I don't think I ever will. I don't think many people do have things figured out. I think along the way, I'm going to continue trying to learn about myself.
Mhm.
I'm going to continue making mistakes, and I'm going to continue trying to learn from those mistakes, but that's what being a person is all about, and that's what going from pain to power is, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and that's pretty honest, right? So just spoiler alert, we never figure it out. I mean, I'm 48. I think you're 20, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. It's an evolution of constant growth, right? But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it too, because it's a journey of understanding yourself in different layers, right?
Yeah.
And through your film, you're then helping others to understand it and making sense of it through that too, right? And I know I saw Beautiful Pam just go up, so I want to like let's get into it, right? So I what sparked this idea of Beautiful Pam um, and this film?
I think Pam as a character, not only is Pam as a character someone that I'm very protective over, right, as an idea, because of the material at hand, but also Pam as a character on a personal level, right, talking about my personal relation to the character and what sparked this idea. I think I was really drawn to this character's isolation. I was really drawn to the way this character feels about themselves and feels about the world, right? And again, a lot of the earlier scenes in the film, we see Pam have the chance to talk about themselves and to talk about their life, and that was my opportunity to sort of journal all of that, and like my little diary, but instead of writing in an actual diary, it was the screenplay, and that was my opportunity to do that, and I sort of just built upon that, and as far as like actually coming up with the idea from my head to paper, I I don't know if I even have the words to explain this. Again, this like inherent feeling of like I need to get this out of my system. It comes to me and I just can never let go of it. And it's a little unhealthy, right? Because a lot of times you'll hear writers and producers, they'll say, have multiple ideas, have 5 ideas that you can make a screenplay out of. For me, I get drawn to one idea and that's that. That's a wrap for the next 2 years. I can't get off that idea for the next 2 years. And
Well, it's worked for you though. So, I mean,
Kind of,
I think everybody has their own system
yeah,
sometimes. I get it. I get it
right.
fully.
It's
You
these
know,
things are
I
incredibly personal.
realized oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no worries. These things are incredibly personal to me. And these ideas, these concepts, these characters, they are so incredibly personal to me that I can't move off that. I need to get this out.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm so glad you did again
Thank you.
because I can't tell you how transformational this film is. So, and that's my mistake because I realize I know it. Mr. M knows it. Anybody who was at some of your film festivals knows it, but our audience does not know. Tell us a little bit about what Beautiful Pam is, what the storyline is. Give us some background so everybody kind of knows what to expect as they walk into the theater to watch Beautiful Pam.
Sure. Well, Beautiful Pam follows a queer sex worker named Pam, going through this sort of existential crisis at a time in their life where they're trying to figure out how to be a person, right? They're trying to figure out how to navigate their identity and this sort of sense of belonging, especially at an older age, right? Where these things get a little bit more complicated. And they're doing so in navigating around addiction, right? And their family and some of their lifestyle choices that have still, are still plaguing them, right? People sometimes, as we get older, and especially in Pam's case, right, and throughout what we see throughout the film, Pam is someone that is trying to make up for yesterday's choices, right? Whether it's good or bad, Pam is someone that is trying to say to themselves, "Wow, like why the fuck did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I say this?" And that's life. That's life. And sometimes throughout life, the people we love and the people we want to understand us and the people we want to love, right? Sometimes they don't understand us, or sometimes they don't love us back. And
Mm.
sometimes we say and do things to one another that we don't even understand why those choices were made. And at its core, that's what this movie is about. That's what we see throughout this movie. We see a group of people constantly make choices and say things to one another that at the end of the day, I think they're still trying to figure out why they did that too.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and the complexity comes out, right? But there's so many layers of emotions in here. So when you think about like some core truths
Mhm.
that when you developed the film and you thought about Pam as this protective character of who Pam is, what are some of those core truths or emotional lessons that
Mhm.
you wanted Pam to experience
Yeah.
through the film?
Well, something we felt very protective over, obviously, given the material, was Pam's identity, right? Pam is someone that feels complicated in life because of who they want to be, right? And for me, the film, there's nothing wrong with who Pam wants to be, right? Pam being a queer sex worker, trying to figure their life out, their identity out. That is the movie. That is the core of the movie. And in my opinion, that should be the most protected aspect of who Pam is, right? The problem that Pam continues to go throughout the film is trying to make other people understand that. And
Mm.
that's the hard part. That's the difficult part, the uncomfortable part that we see throughout the film. I think trying to get other people to understand the choices that you make as a person, that's really hard, and
Yeah.
especially in Pam's case, right, tying it back to personal growth, right, that sort of thing. Pam is telling people, "Hey, this is who I am. This is who I want to be." And trying to make other people understand that is not easy.
No, and it comes out in the film, right? Like and in life, right? It's having people understand. So there's also like this it's interesting because I as I watched and rewatched it again right before this conversation and thinking about this almost like contradictory complexity of unapologeticness that Tam holds of like this is me, this is who I am,
Yeah.
but also this like vulnerability in someone who is still searching for home, still searching for belonging, not fully trusting all of the people that have become close, right? So like there's this complexity in that. As a filmmaker,
Sure.
how did you balance all of those layers into what you created on screen?
I think trying to balance personal elements of myself, right, as the writer and as a filmmaker, versus trying to balance the personal elements of the character and what the character wants to convey on screen. that was a newfound challenge, I would say. That was a learning process, right? And these are things that I had to say to myself, well, I'm going to take this as a lesson, and I'm going to learn how to continue to work on this, right? And to shape this almost, and every film that I want to do, every story that I want to tell, it's not going to be the same thing, obviously, right? I always want to be able to touch on different aspects of myself and different aspects of life, but especially in relation to Pam, right? I think that finding the connection between myself as the filmmaker and Pam as a character and beautiful Pam as a story, I think that the number one most important thing that I had to remind myself of was that it's okay. It's okay to exist, and it's okay to admit when you're wrong. And it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay that other people don't understand you and don't understand some of the decisions you make. These are things that are okay. And again, some of the choices and the problems that Pam goes through, they may not be applicable to many people, and they also might be applicable to some people. But the biggest takeaway on a general level is to watch Pam and say to yourself, I understand. I get what Pam's going through. Even if I can't directly relate to it, I understand it. I empathize with it. And that is something that was very important to me as well in making the film, was empathizing with the material, and hoping that audiences will also empathize with what they're seeing on screen as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, your first few scenes, right? It's okay. It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's a line right in
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Absolutely.
And I think to your point, you're right? Like I can't identify directly with any of the characters in this
Sure.
film, but yet there's so much universal lessons of humanity within it,
Yeah.
in all of it. So you definitely do that. And
Yeah.
I see our chat is blowing up here. I want to just honor some of the conversation going on down here. Phil de Montaigne says that film is amazing, to be honest, for certain. Well shot, and the script is brilliant, and so is the acting. I'm absolutely right. Like, and let's get into that, because I think, and you mentioned it, right? It's not just, yes, it's beautiful Pam. Beautiful Pam is the leading character, but
Mhm.
it's so the film is created by the dynamics and relationships and all the people surrounding Pam.
Yeah.
I want to first go into this dynamic, and I think, again, talking about universal lessons,
Mhm.
Pam is a father, in addition to being, as you said, yes, the core of Pam is a sex worker, right? But at the same time, being a queer sex worker and being a father, there's dynamics there. There's a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
I mean, walk me through it in your thinking about
Yeah.
this, what ignited these ideas and this
Sure.
layer of humanity into your
Sure.
storytelling.
I think parenthood, fatherhood, motherhood, these are not probably, these are definitely some of the most important aspects of human existence, period. Right? Being a parent I mean, I'm not a parent, but I personally feel like I have some pretty great parents, and I'm very grateful to have. And so in saying that, I'm able to I want to identify with what parents have to go through, right? I want to identify with parenthood. Again, these are things that I'm curious about. I'm curious to empathize with and to understand. And so in relation to the film, right, and connecting that with Pam and being a queer sex worker, right? They, to me, are two very, very separate things that Pam is trying to balance on one plate. And we see that throughout the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's necessary, because Pam's need for wanting to be a good father and be a good parent and et cetera, is tied into wanting to be who they want to be, right? Wanting to be a queer sex worker, wanting to, figure out their life on their own terms, right? These things, to me, are balanced on the same plate. And maybe in some scenes we see Pam kind of really struggles with that, and that's normal. That's, again, that's a part of the process, and being a person is not everything is going to be one note. Some things are going to be a struggle. right? And so especially in Pam's case, right, identifying with parenthood, for me, be able to say this is the most important aspect of human existence is parenthood, right? We are shaped by who raises us. That's just what it is. We are shaped by the people who raise us, and that doesn't always have to be a mother or a father. That doesn't always have to be someone we're related to by blood, but we are shaped by the people we're raised by. And I think, especially in Pam's case, Pam is constantly trying to balance being a good parent while also figuring themselves out. And that's a real problem that a lot of parents face in their own ways, right? Most of the time, parent is something that is sort of just thrusted upon the people, and that's tough. That's not
No
easy.
guidebook, right?
Yeah, exactly. No guidebook, right? We want to talk about how being a person is difficult. Not only is being a person difficult, but having to raise another person is also very, very difficult. And especially in Pam's case, figuring out and sort of transforming your entire life and being who you want to be while also having to navigate someone else, in their life, that's tough. And obviously we see that in the film.
Oh, absolutely, right? I think that, again, it's one of those universal lessons
Yeah.
of wanting to be honest and true to the who you are, who you really are, not who others want you to be. But at the same time, you have to consider others and their emotions and feelings and their experiences, and that balance as a parent of what that looks like. And sometimes as a child, right? What that looks
Yeah,
like.
absolutely.
So that dynamic was really powerful, I think. And again, the other thing that I would love to hear you speak about, because I think even when we were at the Queens World Film Festival, you might have spoken about this a little bit, was it's the supporting characters, right? Tell me about your vision behind the relationships in whom Pam surrounds themselves with.
Well, I'll start by saying this. Peter Kontovich as Beetle, right, who plays the enabler, sort of, crappy guy, best friend, he does such a brilliant job at bringing this sort of like soft charisma to the role, right? And for most of the film, when we see Beetle, pop in throughout different scenes, right, in the bar here and the basketball court here, we see him pop in. There is on screen right there is sort of this sense of like, okay, this guy's kind of funny, he says some crazy stuff, and he's a little wacky, and he's charismatic, and and then by the end of the film, there's that final scene in the bedroom between Pam and Beetle, and we're like, whoa, like,
Mm.
oh, okay, so this guy is no good, the dynamic there in terms of the characters, right, between Pam and Beetle, there's a lot of history there. I mean, throughout the film, we see Beetle for president. Throughout the film, we only see about 2 weeks worth of the film, right? We only see 2 weeks worth of these people's lives. There's a lot of history between Pam and their ex-wife Lauren. There's a lot of history between Pam and a character like Beetle. There's history there, and number one, that's not easy to convey on film, right? That was something we really wanted to hammer down, because if we can't convince ourselves that these characters knew each other, how the hell are we going to convince people sitting down and watching the movie for the first time?
Mm.
That was a huge part of shaping the dynamics of the film, right, between the characters, especially Pam and Beetle and Lauren and Pam, was how can we make this dynamic believable, but also the dynamics between the actors as well. I mean, we were I like to think, a very tight knit group in trying to figure these characters out, right? I mean, we rehearsed the film for about 2 weeks, which a lot of, especially indie films, they don't have the time or the privilege to be able to do that. But all of our cast came together and we said, hey, listen, we're down for that. I mean, our entire cast came from the theater world. So they were into the idea of like rehearsing for 2 weeks straight. And that's what we did. We rehearsed every day. Tom, who plays Pam in the film, was a workhorse. This guy was at rehearsal every single day in my little garage for 2 weeks, just ready to hammer characters down, ready to understand the dynamics of every single scene. And the entire cast did that, right? And because of that, because we got to spend so much time together, because we were all in constant communication about the characters and some of their backstories, we were able to sort of formulate this, what I would hope to be like a natural dynamic between the characters and what they believe and what they're saying, especially, right? Some of the things that they say and the choices that they make, we want that to feel real. We want that to feel natural. A
Mhm.
huge part of wanting to make this whole film feel natural was like let's try and make this feel like a documentary. You know, like let's try and approach this from a
Mhm.
perspective of sort of this like cinema verite documentary style filmmaking.
I mean, I think you hit it. Like you hit it on the nail, and it sounds like there was a lot of effort and work and intentionality put into building
Mhm.
that community and that energy, because it showed in the dynamic. And to your point, right? It's like the history was conveyed. And that was the coolest thing, is that, even with just a few scenes with Pam's ex-wife Lauren, you could feel that dynamic of what it could have been between the two of them married,
Yeah.
right? Like that element was very clear. And I think, again, you were able to convey these surprising moments with your characters of
Thank you.
things you didn't expect to happen.
Yeah.
And it just, all of it was so powerful. So it took you 2 years, right, to
Yeah,
make
2
um,
years from now. Like, Tom and Peter have been attached to the roles since, like, January, the beginning of January 2024. So it's been a 2-year-long process from the time we're recording this today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But then, and it actually it has completely been out since March what?
22nd, so about
March
2 weeks.
22nd.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a good amount of time. So in your 2 years from the start of this idea in your mind that came, and you couldn't let go, right?
Sure.
Because you knew it had to happen and you made it happen, to now these 2 years later, right? In seeing what it's become, in seeing the response to it, what are some of the big pieces that you've learned about yourself, personally, but also as a filmmaker?
Um, I think I have to think about that for a second, you know? I think that throughout the past 2 years, right? Number 1, I went from 18 years old or, late 17 years old to now being 20 years old. And so that's such a transitional period in life, going from that age, right, straight out of high school to now.
Right, and most people aren't doing films in that transitional period, right?
It was a crazy, it's a very transitional period. So a lot of things change. A lot of things remain unbalanced, rather, or change from that, right? I
Mm,
think for me, a big part of going from the very beginning of Pam to where we're at now is I think I have a better grasp personally on a personal level for myself. I think I have a better grasp on conveying what I'd like to convey through the stories, through the characters, however, with the tools of different people involved, if that makes sense, right? I feel
mhm.
that from when I first made the film, or when I first thought of the film and I attached these actors to the roles, to now, I've been able to really grow close with the people that worked on the film, right? And now I sort of feel this sense of like confidence and connection to these people, where I'm saying to myself, I want to let them in more on this process. I want to be able to, like, I have that ability now. I have that privilege now. It's not something I had before, right? This is something that sort of like meshed together. I meshed with these collaborators together throughout this process, and that's something I didn't have before, right? That's, again,
Yeah.
it's a part of the process. Each film, every project, every story, there's always going to be different moving elements and different things to pull from. And in making Pam, from then to now, I've been able to pull these different elements and these different talents and pull them together and say, hey, this is a story we want to tell. And so now with this next film I'd like to do, I want to expand on that process even further. That's just sort of the natural progression I'd like to target.
I mean, I love that, and I love that your community of collaborators, right, is part of that growth process itself in these very important years of 17 to 20, right?
I
Like,
certainly agree.
it just still kind of like catches me. Like, I'm like, wow, like it's very impressive,
Thank
right?
you so much. I appreciate
And
it.
and yet, as meeting you and talking to you, you're very humble, unassuming kind of guy. So you've taken it quite in stride, which is awesome. But you've
I
grown from it. So what about with you personally? Like just your
sure.
own, um, just you. Like what did you learn about yourself?
Yeah.
And even and sometimes we talk a lot about ego in this show.
Sure.
I like to bring it in because I think it, especially in creative world. Come on now, I'm
Sure.
my ego because I'm a creative. I think all of us do, but we discover things about what gets in the way sometimes of our progress in creating.
Mhm.
Because we kind of take a moment to recognize where our ego comes in. Were there moments in filmmaking that had woken you up to parts of yourself that you didn't realize?
Well, I'll start by saying this. I'm not the same person I was when I wrote the film, right? And that should be the case, right? Because if I was still the same person, then I think there'd be a problem there. I wrote the film at a time and a place where I did feel, again, I really related to aspects of Pam pertaining to loneliness and isolation, right? And with this next film I'm writing, that's coming from a different place. Every project I want it to feel personal to myself and my feelings on the world, and so I never want to stay in the same place when I'm coming up with this stuff. And then as far as progressing as a person, right, taking lessons as a person, and saying to myself, well, this is what I connected with. I think I've been able to connect with not trying to not have an ego, right? Because in my opinion, my existence, I am so insignificant in the world, and my existence is quite insignificant, that I feel that, to me, the biggest thing in my life is the work itself, right? And as long as the work and the film has just a tiny bit of significance to someone, right? Someone taking an hour out of their day to watch the film, that's what matters to me. I try not to think about myself at all throughout the process and throughout the past 2 years. I don't ever want to place myself in a position where I should be thinking about myself before the film itself, right? Before the work. I want the work to speak for me and speak on my behalf and share my perspective on things. And because of that, I feel like I almost want ego out of the picture completely, right? I don't ever want to say to myself, well, my ego got in the way there. I want to be completely empty in terms of ego. Again, I feel that my existence is meaningless. I think human existence, I think what comes out of our existence, I think that's what really matters. And for me, trying to tell these stories, that's what really matters to me in my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I mean, I think all of us don't want our ego and things, but it's human nature, right? Like I think that goes to human nature, and even in the film, right? Like I think your characters all have an element of their ego coming into moments,
Oh
right?
yeah, it's
You
human.
know, like
No, it's human. Ego is an interesting word, right? Because when you hear the word ego, there's a negative connotation behind it. But in actuality, for me, ego is more of how you can personally relate to what's in front of you, right? And sometimes that can be an overbearing feeling, right? The word ego, again, there's a negative connotation, but in most cases I think it's just because it's used very overbearingly, right? Some people can be very overbearing with their presence in life, and
mm,
that's where ego becomes a problem, right? I think ego sometimes it can be a positive thing, because I think it is important to understand your value. I think it's important to understand your worth and what you bring to the world. Um, but for me, when I say to myself, I want to remove ego from the equation, I I never want to again put myself first before the work that I want to do. Because the work is the most important thing to me in the entire world. My livelihood is so tied to this sort of thing that
mm.
this is everything to me. And I try not to see myself in the equation.
No, and I appreciate that, and I really appreciate your breakdown of ego. I think about this a lot, and I agree. I think we all have them, right? We have them, but where do they get in the way, and where do they support us,
Mhm.
right? And there's a difference sometimes between certainty and confidence that comes from a different place of just knowing that what you're doing is of value.
Sure.
Doesn't mean it's about you, it's a value for sharing a story that's important to be heard.
Yeah.
That's not coming from a place of wanting to center yourself,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
it sounds like is part of the film's goal, right? It is the storytelling, it's sharing that story. And I mean, in thinking about that, you talk about how you see that connection of your story and isolation. But again, Pam's story itself is so different from yours. Was there research that you had to do in understanding this? Like, and how did that process as a filmmaker happen for you to create the characters in all of the layers and realness that they all exist in.
Sure. Well, I have to give a lot of credit to Tom in this case as well, because Tom and I, not only did we have a lot of conversations every single day for hours on end, we were sending each other 20-minute long voice messages talking about the character, right? And Pam and the characters around Pam. But Tom, especially playing Pam, right? And working around sensitive material, right? Material that does matter in this case. We did do our research in talking to people from these communities, right? Talking to sex workers, talking to queer people, right? These are things that really matter to us, and trying to figure it out and trying to get it right almost, you know? And some people, based on their perspective, are going to have different opinions on the material, right? And that's okay. But at the end of the day, for Tom and myself, it was a really important, sensitive thing for us to try and get right. And especially in talking about being protective of someone like Pam, right? Being protective of the material and Pam's lifestyle. These were things that were extremely important to us to try and get right, right? And to try and understand and to try and research, try and talk to people, try and communicate with people. Even as far as, you know, a lot of secondhand research as well, and going to on like online forums and chat rooms and talking to people on there, you know, trying to find perspectives of people from different places all over the world. That was something that I like to think we researched pretty intensely.
Wow. I mean, and you would have to, because to your point, it is
Absolutely.
sensitive material, right? It is sensitive material, and I think how it lands, whom it lands on, right? And so to that point, and Film de Montaigne says that was good. Absolutely, right? That was very intentional, very thoughtful, very, aware of the impact and the potential of what it could do if it wasn't done
Sure.
with care, right? To
Absolutely.
that point, I'm curious about your audience that has watched the film. So I know Queen's World was the first time it was actually shown was at Queen's World, or was it shown prior to that?
Yeah, second time. We had a screening in Manhattan for the B Frank Film Fest a couple weeks earlier.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. But in thinking about your audience, I'm going to ask you two layered questions, so we can talk about them there. But like, first, I think there's the audience of people who would otherwise have no idea what they're walking into in watching this film and walking into it, and
yes,
what their responses and reactions have been. And then those who, to your point, I think you did some really careful research. You communicated and learned and understood better how to represent the queer and the sex worker community, right? How many of those individuals have watched the film and given you any feedback? Like, I'm just curious to know what those two different audience members
sure.
have had in reactions.
I think so far throughout our 6 or 7 month festival run, the reception to Pam has been something we are so incredibly grateful for, right? And talking about two different audiences and people who may directly come from Pam's community, right? People who can really directly relate to Pam's lifestyle, and then the people who maybe can't relate to Pam's lifestyle. The reception we've gotten so far has been really overwhelming in a very positive way. You know, we've been lucky enough to talk to people after screenings, right? Through Instagram messages, right? Reading reviews. People have been into not only the circumstances surrounding Pam, right? What Pam is going through on a personal level as far as their lifestyle, but as you brought up earlier a few times, the dynamics at play, right? These are all very human, natural elements of storytelling and of life. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's why the film lands with various types of people, because we were trying to approach it from this sort of natural human standpoint, right? I think that people who have seen the film have understood Pam, I feel, after watching the film, and have told us, I get it now. You know, I understand Pam, and that's the biggest thing we would hope for, right? That's the biggest thing we wanted in making the film. That's something we're very, very grateful for. You know, if you could walk away from the film and just understand what Pam's going through and empathize with that, right? Even if you can't understand it, if you can empathize with it, that's the win, in my opinion. That's what we set out to do. I think right now we're at a place where, in human nature, where sometimes when we don't understand people, we get offended and we get angry and we get hateful, and that doesn't have to be the case. And in Pam's case, right, and people watching the film, there have been people that may not have been able to understand Pam as a person, but they can walk away from it and they've told us, well, I empathize with it and I want to understand Pam now, and that to us has been a really great feeling.
Oh, it's huge. And I mean, I think it also goes to just the film, and that's what Pam asked for throughout the film is the
Yes,
understanding, right?
that is what Pam asked for, absolutely.
And I, and empathy and understanding and walking away with that, you built the humanity of the story, right? You're so intentional with that, and that definitely was what was accomplished
Thank
um,
you.
in such a beautiful way. So let's break down a little bit more of the cinematography decisions you made, right? So there's the story, there's the core of it, there's who it is, there's the acting, but there's some really intentional music decisions, there's intentional like silent pauses. Tell me a little bit about some of the, like, as a filmmaker, the things you're most excited about to share in elements you created with a lot of precision to
Sure.
create the story.
Well, talking about visual language, right? Talking about earlier, trying to make it feel like a documentary, sort of this like cinema verite documentary style, that was number one on the priority list in terms of the cinematography, right? So there's a lot of intimate close-ups, especially in the car scenes as well. There's a lot of car scenes. We see Pam spend a lot of time in cars, and that was something I was actively thinking of how to shoot that when we were, coming up with the film, when we were developing the characters and when I was writing the script. These were things I was actively thinking about. Well, I want to shoot it this way. I want to shoot it from the back seat and these sort of very intimate close-ups. One of my favorite scenes on a cinematography level was towards the end of the film when we see Pam in the Taco Bell eating alone by themselves. And I've said to people, I mean, is there anything more depressing to watch than someone eating Taco Bell at 11 o'clock at night by themselves? And that was the point, though, right? We were trying to show that Pam is someone that's just lonely. Pam is someone that is extremely isolated. And that was one of my favorite scenes to shoot because in the wide shots throughout that scene, we have a couple close-ups of Pam actually eating, but in the wide shots, I tried to frame it in a way where they're on screen right there. I tried to frame it in a way where we see a lot of empty tables, right? And we have all these empty seats around Pam, and it's just Pam in the corner right there. And that's that, and that's just Pam. That to me is that shot right there is the whole movie, in my opinion.
Mm.
Pam is alone in a room where people can observe and people can watch and people trying to figure this person out. But nobody really does throughout the course of the film, and that's just how it is, and that's what we see Pam go through. And Pam is stuck fighting this fight by themselves, and that sucks. That it sucks, and it's tragic almost. It's very tough to watch. It's uncomfortable, and that was something we wanted to really try and convey throughout the cinematography. And so again, certain scenes like the when Pam is, dealing with a customer in the car or just by themselves in the car, those were shot very intentionally. And then as far as Pam sort of just doing their own thing, right, sitting in a Taco Bell by themselves, that was shot in its own intentional way as well to try and convey how Pam is feeling in that moment.
Mm. But really, really powerfully done because to your
Thank
point,
you.
right? Like, just even looking at just that one still shot, you
Mhm.
can see it, that the energy
Yeah.
of, what's happening and how Pam is experiencing that moment, right? Comes out. And yeah, those car scenes are powerful, right? Because they have so many different layers to them, each one. And they reveal different things about Pam throughout the story
Yeah.
for certain. I love that, and I love that you delved a little bit into the film part of it and cinematography because my listeners here, they're not all like they're
That's
not
okay.
all theater, they're not all filmmakers, but we're always curious to understand and know the inside story, right, of how art is created,
Mhm.
because art is so personal,
I
and
agree with that. Absolutely.
we always want people to walk away with something, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, hey, that's the beautiful thing about art, right? I've said this many times throughout the past couple months is that the reason I think we as humans are so attracted to movies and performance and music and all sorts of art is that we're able to interpret that and have our own interpretation of that. You know, we're able to walk away from these things and find a way to relate to that, right? And I don't understand the psychology behind why humans react to art the way we do. I don't know if I could put that in words here, but what I will say is that's the beautiful thing about art in itself, right? And movies and music. These are things that we are just so naturally drawn to and wanting to relate to and wanting to interpret. It is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful aspects of being a person, right? Is sitting down, watching a movie and saying, wow, I love that movie. You know, this is what I related to about that movie. What a great performance. What a great song. These are incredibly beautiful aspects of being a human, and especially in relation to beautiful Pam, right? And what we see at the end of the film, right? And people have come up to us and have said, you know, well, I think this happens to Pam, or I think that happens to Pam, you know?
Mhm.
And throughout the film, people have said, you know, well, I thought this scene represented this. These are all really beautiful, wonderful things that really, really mean so much.
Is there any particular ones where someone interpreted it in a way where you had an aha of like, oh, I didn't even think about that?
Um, Someone said that after the end of the movie that maybe Pam just goes to sit down, maybe they go to a bagel store and get a sandwich, and I said, "I don't know about that." I don't know about all that, you know? I mean, maybe if that's the way you interpreted it, you know? I mean, I think for me, I never wanna be too specific when people ask me about, like, "Well, what happens to Pam at the end of the film, and
Right.
what does this scene mean?" And I never wanna be unspecific because of you know, like a defense mechanism, right? It's more so I take away a completely different interpretation from the film, having wrote it, having made it, and I don't ever want to like muddy someone else's interpretation, right? I want someone else's interpretation to be able to um, relate to their own life, you know, in a way, and that's something that's really important to me as a filmmaker. So I never want my lousy opinions to reflect on what someone else might think of the film and the material. But honestly, the people that have had conversations with us and have talked about the characters and the end of the film and such, it's been really wonderful. It's just great. It's great being able to hear people, you know, again, take time out of their day to watch something you made and then have an interpretation of it, you know, and say, well, I thought about this. And to me, in my head, I'm like, wow, you thought about the characters even after watching the film? You know, like you thought about this? That's the win in my book.
Absolutely. I mean, that means it's lingering, right? You've made an
Yeah.
impact. Pam's made an impact. The characters have made an
Yeah.
impact. The cinematography, right? Like all of it stays with you
Mhm.
because it is really intentionally done. And to that point, everybody, please go watch it. So where do we watch it?
You can find it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel for free at Sid Cinematics on YouTube, Sid Cinematics on YouTube. Beautiful Pam, check it out. It's only 63 minutes. It's a feature film. I hope you like it.
It's beautifully done. And how do we follow you?
You could subscribe to my YouTube channel, again, Sid Cinematics, or on Instagram as well, Sid Cinematics. I post a lot on Instagram. I'm always on there. So if you want to support me in my work, please go check it out. Also, the film is available for review on Letterboxd if anybody uses the movie review app. So you can check it out on there as well.
And make sure you leave a comment, you share with someone else. You know, those YouTube, I mean, speaking of which, please leave a comment down here.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
YouTube and the algorithm loves some conversation
Yeah.
about what we're putting out there. So if it's about the show, please leave it down here. If it's about JR and the film Beautiful Pam, go to his YouTube channel, which is all underneath here too in the description. You'll see it there. You can follow him on Instagram as well at Sid Cinematics. Make sure that you are, I love it. You are always posting, and I'm sure there's more you're going to be talking about and sharing. And thank you so much. Okay, as we close out Pain to Power, I always come back to healing. How has the film healed you?
You know, I don't know if it has. No, that's a joke. I think that the film has healed me in a way because I've been able to understand um, isolation a bit more, right? I've been able to understand why some of the choices I make reflect upon the lifestyle I lead. You know, and that's the core of the movie right there. You know, and some of these choices and some of these decisions and some of these thoughts I've had and that I had while writing the film and making Pam as a character, they have led me down this path of understanding, right? And that's how I've felt healed from the film.
That's a beautiful thing.
Thank
That's
you.
a beautiful thing, right? And so much connected to why you created it, right? Like, so I love that full circle for you, to understand isolation better, to understand your own decisions, which is life, right? We're constantly evolving and understanding that. Thank you so much, JR. Like, this has been such an amazing conversation. I appreciate what you put out in the world. I cannot wait to see what you're putting out next. Do you want to give us any spoilers of what it is? And I see Film de Montaigne says, indeed, great chat. And we have great conversation. Thank you so much for everybody who's tuning in. And if you haven't done it yet, like, subscribe, leave a comment, please. I am Brown Girl Interrupting. All of the stories that I am telling you about are the idea of turning our pain into power. So we have JR tonight, but please go back and watch season 5 of all of the shows and all the past seasons as well, because this is what this is. These are the stories that we tell. And to your point, I think there is something called oxytocin, which is a chemical, that is released when we hear and connect with others through storytelling. Movies do that. Music does that. My show might do that.
Absolutely, 100%. This is a fantastic show. I'm so grateful to be here and to be able to have had this conversation with you. This has been really wonderful. This is probably one of my favorite interviews I've done over the past few months promoting the film. So thank you so much for giving us the platform to talk about the film. It really means a lot. I thought this has been a really meaningful conversation. And as far as what's next, I mean, it might be a few years before I can come back and talk about the film. But what I will say is, it's a film about grief, and it sort of touches on isolation again. And it follows a homeless character, and this person gets into a bunch of crazy stuff. So, it's it'll hit some of the notes that I've been building towards with a film like Beautiful Pam. So
I love it. Can't
thank
wait.
you so
We'll be
much.
following you to keep seeing when it comes on, and we'll have you on when it comes on.
Absolutely.
That just made my day that this was that for you to say that about this interview. Because I know, it's been a long time coming that we planned to do this. And timing was so important.
Yes, it was.
And this really has been an honor. It's been beautiful to be able to close out my season with this conversation. And to that point, to everyone watching, again, yes, follow me, subscribe. I know that I won't be having live shows for Pain to Power, but there will be, and stay tuned for my new podcast, After the Breaking. I am going into coaching, and you are going to learn and understand how we take all of these pain moments in our lives and use a framework to build and heal and empower ourselves. So men, women, anybody who is in this space of breaking through life challenges and you're ready to heal, please come and join me. Follow me on YouTube. I'm writing on Substack. I am on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. God, I'm everywhere. LinkedIn. All the links are below, and you can find me. I'll pop up in some way, in something, somewhere, all the time. Thank you again, JR. Thank you to our amazing producer and also the filmmaker extraordinaire, as well as one of the board members of the Queens Film Festival, which is why we were able to meet. So I got to give him a shout out to Mr. M.
Mr. M.
Thank you to the iRant Network and to everyone who is on this network and following us and supporting. Thank you to all of the supporters for this entire season. Shout out to Mr. M for certain. Yes. And please just, follow us, like, comment, share our stuff, and continue to find belonging, learn more, and expand with your curiosity of others and their stories. And let's heal the isolation that others are feeling. Thank you so much, Kevin, for tuning in. Excellent conversation. Appreciate you, Kevin. All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you again in the next season of Pain to Power. Peace, love, and light. Night, Jared.
Good night.